Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Well, as our mother used to say, look what the cat dragged in. This is my brother, Bill, Professor Miller. Teaches at the University of Michigan Law School. A prolific author.
Once prolific author.
Well, how many books have you written?
11.
11 books, okay. Bill is not, even though he's known as a great lecturer and goes all over the world lecturing, he's always extraordinarily uncomfortable when he's on my show.
Well, I'm always very uncomfortable when a camera's pointed at me.
Well,
I believe, like some primitives, that soul capture or whatever. I start to get a twitch and a kind of a pull in the back of my neck when I see that thing. I do. I mean,
it's there is no doubt that having a camera pointed at you, whether you're conscious of it or not, I think influences your behavior because it's you're being stared at.
Well, I've been told that I try and not make faces or whatever, and when you become self-conscious about not making faces, you make more faces. And I once had a student say, when I saw myself on videotape once, I said, geez, I just didn't know I made so many faces or had that many tics. And she says, you didn't know?
You do, but I do too, I think. I mean, I make a lot of faces, but I think I'm aware of it. Anyway, Bill blew through he's on his way to New York State, and I have to say we had a hell of a good time last night, but
too good.
We're paying for it this morning. We are not feeling well, either of us. That is correct. But wow, we had a good time. This is the problem. And we decided when we were having such a good time that we would try, if Bill were to come...
We would not say the T word.
We would try to do an entire show and avoid the elephant in the room. Because...
It's just boring.
It's not that it's just anxiety producing.
Yeah.
And you just can't... So Bill, I took a few notes last night in our carousing, and some of them make no sense to me at all anymore. But let's the one thing that happened, and this has nothing to do, of course, with anything. It's just
updating you on the family.
Yes, updating you on our family. I had called our mother just about 15 minutes before Bill showed up at my door, and I'd left a message. She hadn't answered, and then right after Bill came, my phone rang, and she was calling back. And she had quite a story to tell.
Well,
I mean, yeah.
Lightning struck
her house.
The tree next to the room she sits in or sleeps in and plays her bridge
games on.
And the tree split in half and caved and fell over on the roof where she is, and broke through, cracked through. It didn't slice the room in half.
Well, someone took a picture, and it's unbelievable.
She missed death by not that much, and then she tells us, she says, well, I was thinking, that would have been a perfect way to go.
You don't even know what hit you.
Yeah,
right.
Know.
You're sitting there playing bridge on your computer, and then literally the roof caves in.
The roof caved in.
Roof. See, now, Bill...
I say roof.
It isn't the way you pronounce the roof. Caves. The roof.
How do you pronounce?
Well, here's how.
How do you pronounce HOOF? You don't even know. Hoof. How do you pronounce FOOT?
Foot.
Foot. How do you pronounce ROOF? Roof.
Wrong! It's just wrong. Here's how I know it's wrong, and here's where I was disabused of that. And it's a long time now, but when the
Don't we say roof in Green Bay?
Yes, that's where you get it from. It's a Green Bay accent thing.
So when did you get so snooty that you can't talk like where you grew up?
When there was a song out, Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh.
Because if it's roof, nothing rhymes. It's a fiddler on the roof.
Okay. I put my foot in my mouth. There's words that exist. This is like a boring academic lecture, but there's words that exist in biforms where there's two competing pronunciations, and they often are regional. They often are marked by class. But you can be nervous at a point about which is the right way to say a brooch. Is it a brooch?
Brooch.
Or is it a brooch?
It's a brooch, although it's spelled brooch, right? Or is that brooch?
No, or brooch.
Brooch. So, the other day I used a word on the show, and a dear friend of mine who's a stickler for all kinds of things, emailed me and decried the pronunciation of a word that I have been mispronouncing, I guess, forever.
Like pronunciation. You said.
I said pronunciation.
You said you kind of split the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Pronounce this. FLACCID.
Flaccid.
Wrong. 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 Ha ha. That's what I said. Flaccid. That's not the pronunciation. It's not even close. What it is flaccid. I looked it up. She was right. I'm totally wrong. Flaccid. In some dictionaries, flaccid is not even given as acceptable. I'm just telling you.
So what is the word flaccid then? Is it FLACID?
There is no word flaccid.
Well, there is now. Language is what people speak,
Well,
if I said flaccid, nobody would understand me.
Is that true? I'm just telling you. She heard me say flaccid and thought, and said, it's flaccid. And I thought, there's no way it's flaccid.
We all have, like, I'm a stickler for certain uses of certain words, but I always feel nervous when I'm like that. I can't stand what's happened in the language to make, that phrase, moving forward or going forward, when you just use the future tense.
I know.
Use the
it drives me
tense.
Crazy.
It drives me crazy.
I know.
And everybody uses it, and it drives me crazy.
Right.
And it started about, it's part of that talk of like, let's put it all behind us talk, the talk of no moral responsibility, stuff like that. Forget and forgive, or just forget. I don't know. So I'm going nuts here. So
Bill.
Well, anyway, the tree.
Nah, screw the tree.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, that was pretty cool. I mean, actually.
What, that a tree? She'll have. There'll be a lot of rebuilding necessary.
Yeah, really. It took. Wow, it was amazing. I feel sorry for the tree. I don't think that tree was in good shape anyway, but
split it.
Yeah, just split it. So
I wonder, that kind of was Zeus up there trying to get her or something?
No.
Zap her for some reason?
Here, Laura writes, love your guest today.
Hello, Laura Harlow.
I also pronounce roof as Bill does. We pronounce crick the same as well. Around here they do too, I think. Don't people say
C-R?
Do you say Turtle Creek? No. You do? Some people do. Crick for creek.
I have to actually think to not say crick. If like there's Battle Creek, Michigan, and I want to say Battle Creek, of course nobody would understand.
No, because it's Battle Creek.
Yeah.
But okay.
Duck Creek, remember?
Yeah, back in Wisconsin, we would say Duck Creek. And roof.
And roof.
Well, I'm sorry. They're incorrect. Laura, by the way, is...
my secretary. Well, the secretary, not just mine, the secretary of 8 or 9 of us at the University of Michigan Law School, and we all think that each one of us think that we're her favorite because of how fast she turns the work around, that we think like, oh, we're the one whose work she does first. And it's just that she's so damn efficient that we all think we're first.
But you really are.
No, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure.
Well, don't put her on the spot.
Right.
Okay. So, guys, I really don't. I mean, I have been reading the paper. I do know it's horror upon horror upon horror. But I want to get to something that, Bill, you... wait a minute.
What is this? The T word.
I remember, okay, this is Roger. Terrifying, tragic, treasonous. I remember as a kid watching Looney Tunes cartoons, and a man took his dog in to see a talent agent, saying that his dog could talk by asking the dog question. What does sandpaper feel like? Rough.
Yeah.
Rough. What's on top of a roof?
Rough.
Rough.
See, you pronounced it properly.
Who's the greatest baseball player?
Ruth.
Ruth. After being thrown out, the dog asks his master, maybe I should have said DiMaggio? That's cute. That's cute. So I remember, Bill, when you were doing one of your books, it would have been Humiliation, I think.
Yeah.
And you, as usual, were off with your exquisite sensitivity to human interaction. And you were saying that, like, when a plumber, let's say, comes to your house, that you have always been excruciatingly aware that the plumber looked on you with disdain.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, now, wait a minute. So this set up, and I had never thought of that. I thought, what?
Well, because you figure like he's already thinking that here's some guy who doesn't know, and what you call the plumber for is that any normal human being should have been able to fix themselves. And and a plumber comes in and just thinks like,
what an idiot!
Contemptible lack of manhood, or it just like, and so I always kind of like talk up that, get hyper anxious and will mention that, I ride a motorcycle and stuff like, overcompensatory.
Yeah, so you're talking to the guy.
Of course, I talk to him and I overcompensate by.
So you immediately say, "I ride a motorcycle."
Yeah, you want to
thinking
see
that
the bike, and
Are
stuff.
you kidding?
No,
you're that self-conscious.
I mean, I'll it's not like I do that every time, but I found myself doing that at times, and then of course feel even more pathetic and contemptible. So, yeah, I mean...
I remember thinking when you said that, I thought, that's just not true.
There's nothing more dangerous than another human being. And so you always are worried, or at least at issue when you confront another human being, is whether you walk away a winner from that encounter or a loser from that encounter, and whether you just made a fool of yourself or are looked down with contempt by the person you just dealt with. And it's not like that happens every time, but we make quick judgments about people we talk to or interactions and say, well, I did just, a quick kind of sense that
so much of what you say that I know is true strikes people listening to you say, what the fuck is he talking about? So every interaction I have is like is a battle of some sort,
yeah,
where
of course.
Somebody comes. Okay, well, Bill,
I mean, they can be very conventional and friendly, like, hi, how are you? You really want to know? No, you say, fine. Okay, we have little norms that allow us to get through those encounters with very little risk at stake. But what if you had a booger hanging out of your nose staring at it? And then you would be disgraced. I mean, do you remember the kid in third grade who peed in their pants in third grade? Yeah, of course you do. That's the only thing you remember about them. Patsy Alt.
Patsy Ault.
Yeah. It's only because she cried. I assume that probably more kids did it, but she's the one I remember, and it's because she didn't react well. I mean, who knows?
What's called reacting well to peeing?
Just pretending you did, hoping you get through with nobody noticing. But you think of all the kinds of ways that we remember people. And it's always not, it's rarely the flattering thing about them that we remember that locks them into our consciousness. What do you think of when you think of Bill Clinton?
Oh, I don't know. I'm supposed to think of Monica Lewinsky. That's the first thing?
I mean, you just think of kind of like how he basically canceled himself as a serious human being.
Well, but I don't think he did, because he went on to head this foundation that does a lot of really good work around the world, and people. I don't know. You're nuts. I mean, you're so self-conscious. You were on my show once, and it was like around Christmas time, and so we were talking again about how fraught gift giving is.
Yeah,
because I mean, you've written 500,000 words on gift giving and how every human interaction creates.
We all know that there's just fundamental norm in normal society and that you got to repay a gift. You got to repay your debts. If somebody does you a favor, you got to do a favor back to them. Sometimes it can just merely be satisfied by showing proper gratitude. But you all know that if I were, gift giving is so dangerous that we only allow it to take place on about 4 or 5 days a year. I mean, Christmas, birthdays, and then the phony holidays like Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, stuff like that. And if I were
Stop banging the table.
If you were to walk up to, let's say, a person like the producer here, if we were to walk up and if I were to walk up tomorrow and give Amy a gift wrap gift, she'd look at me like,
she'd be uncomfortable, right? Like,
what
why?
the hell's this?
Right.
And you know that if a guy gives a girl a gift, that usually what it's leading for and what kind of repayment is at stake. So there's this wonderful Old Norse. I mean, my specialty is Iceland, medieval Iceland in the sagas. And there's this one guy who gets a gift from somebody, a valuable gift from that is given to him by a fellow poet, by the King of Norway. And the guy who gives the gift stays at Egil, who is the person who's the recipient of the gift, for 3 days, and Egil doesn't show up. And he says, "Here, leave him this shield. I want to give him this, and it's got jewels on it." And Egil comes home about 12 hours later and says, "What's that?" He looks at it, and they said, "Einar was here to give this to you." And he says, "What does he expect? How can I repay that? Let's ride out and kill him."
What? Jesus.
And they calmed him down, and then so Egil instead composed a poem in honor of Einar and the gift. But his first reaction was to want to kill him for imposing an obligation on him to have to repay it. And a gift is a burden. Receiving a gift is a burden. And just think, like,
I once told you about a acquaintance of mine who received some kind of jewelry from a friend, a woman friend, I think. So it was woman to woman for whatever, Christmas or something. And she said it was this piece of crap. And she actually said to the woman, after she'd opened it, she looked at it and she said, "You didn't really mean to give this to me, did you?" So, and you were like, wow, like that is never, people don't do that.
Well, because the gift was so crappy that she felt it was meant as an insult.
That's right.
And she responded to it to take revenge. Of course, you understand that gifts can be negative gifts too. Like, right. So like if I slap you in the face, you got to slap me back, right? Because I just did you a favor. and you
What
have
do
to
you mean, a
return the
favor?
favor. I'm
That's not
favor a gift. Well, I think gifts have positive value all the time. Gifts are just something that demands repayment. So if I insult you with a gift, then I'll repay you by giving you an insulting gift back. I mean, that's it. But we have to have the repayment obligation is absolutely foundational to a gift, unless it's parents to kids. I'm talking about people roughly at the same, standing. But even with parents giving a gift to a kid, you expect that the kid's going to be good.
No, you
for at
don't.
least an hour or two. Or if not, our parents would take and put the gift up. I had that happen to me and can remember it many a time.
Well, our parents were not good with gift giving. They would give and take away.
It's the standard thing, and people know it, that people who are always doing other people favors in effect make the recipient inferior to them, and that's what part of it people perceive as the hostility in generosity.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so right. Okay, Ray has written.
Everybody knows.
All right, no,
about.
people don't. And after that show where you were talking about gift giving being, so fraught, I had more emails from people who were saying, "What the hell is he talking about?" That they have
these are people who are constantly offending people with gifts. They're just clueless. They're lucky that they just didn't live in medieval Iceland where they would have been killed. Yeah.
Okay, Ray says, Professor Miller in the studio. Yay. Please ask him if he has any recorded lectures, and would he please put them online? We autodidacts have found YouTube a great vehicle for exposure to great academics. And not so great. Does he see disgust as a motivating force for the radical right, as embodied in the Camp of the Saints book? Well, I want to say, Bill and I yesterday were talking about how, well, I'm just going to end up reading what Charles Blow said today, because he summed up what we had been saying. Is this sort of on, that's on topic?
Well, I guess it's on topic.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
But I could answer him. I am very nervous, as I said at the start, about cameras pointed at me. And if I knew a lecture of mine was being recorded, I would self-destruct in anxiety about it going public. The thing is when you have students in front of you, you develop a certain rapport as to what you can say, as to who you can tease, as to who you can't. And a lot of things that would play well and be understood live will be misunderstood on the web. So I have never allowed personally kind of like taped lectures to go up on YouTube. One is up there that was put up there by a lecture I gave some years ago.
I think Ray has seen that one.
Yeah, and but not with my permission. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Charles Bro wrote this, and we were talking about. See, we're getting into Trump, but peripherally, we'll stay Trump supporters. Okay. No amount of moralizing from people like us, the opposition, will affect the fervor of his supporters. Quite the opposite. And that's the thing. Nothing quickens the pulse and induces the delight of conservatives more than the consternation of liberals. They would let the whole country collapse for the pleasure of spite. And we were saying the same thing.
Sure.
We were saying the same thing. Even if his policies harm them, it doesn't matter. They love that people like us are screaming and ranting and raving and tearing our hair out. They love our unhappiness so much.
Oh, they're willing to pay for it, because in fact they think
despise us.
They're getting a good because we're paying more. So they say, sure. I mean, the trade wars will lose me my job or raise the cost. I won't be able to afford my car or this and that. But who cares? Because it's really going to hurt those smug you know,
That's right.
educated, you know, tranny, weenie,
Right.
stuff
That's
like
right.
that.
No, it's true.
And I
So-
can understand that kind of motivation. I think probably Schadenfreude is one of our most important emotions for guiding how we deal with everything. I mean,
underappreciated because no one will. It's not.
I
right
told
to-
Nino, I mean Lynn, this joke this morning that's I think every culture or most cultures have this joke. It's just trying to capture this sense of competitiveness and resentment of other people's having a good life. And it's told that it's a Slavic in origin, that it explains kind of the poverty of certain kinds of societies. But anyway, let's say a peasant, a genie comes down and allows this peasant, to have anything he can think of, only on this condition, that his neighbor have double it. And the peasant doesn't think for more than 3 seconds, and he says, "Take out one of my eyes." So people are much willing to, let's say, harm themselves if they can harm their neighbor more. But actually, you know of all kinds of people. What we really call irrational is the number of people who are willing to harm themselves, let's say 2x, 200, to harm their neighbor just 100. Now that's irrational.
But I think I think that is not acknowledged, what's going on in our country now, and the incredible animus that those deplorables have for us, and their willingness to take down the house around all of us to
you know, the thing
express their what?
Just
their hatred?
Just so your viewers or listeners don't think I'm your standard academic lefty weenie, I'm quite a centrist, and the academic left is to me. I love, like the Trumpistas, I love horrifying them. So, but I still am anxious that basically this wonderful country is basically surrendering and destroying itself out of what? Fear of being invaded by Mexican cleaning ladies. I mean, come on, man up out there, people.
That's what I always say, but whatever. Ray wants another question. Does the professor see any connection between the old Irish law of fasting protest and the IRA martyr Bobby Sands?
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Yes. I don't know if people know this. In the ancient Irish laws, there's a procedure where a poor creditor, where some poor man who actually handed over his cow to a richer, more powerful person wants his cow back. And the richer man, more powerful man, won't pay back what he owes the poor man. Well, the poor man can go to the door of the rich man and fast against the rich man. And fasting against was a formal legal procedure. If the rich man actually claimed that the debt wasn't owing, he could have a fast off with the other guy. Fasting was a very self-destruction, in other words, threatening to die.
Mutual self-destruction.
Well, mutual in that case. To die was to shame, in fact, the creditor, the debtor, into paying his debt.
So hunger strikes, like Bobby Sands.
So in Ireland, the tradition yes, map on the Maze Prison Bobby Sands phenomenon to a continued 2,000-year-old tradition. Yep. And the same thing the same practice occurs in India called sitting dharna, where you basically fast in front of your powerful person to ask for justice. In fact, the book of Job is, in a sense, that. Job is sitting on his dung heap, clamoring against God to pay up or to account for himself.
Speaking of the Bible, since you just went there, one of my scribbles that I don't understand from our drunken state last night. It says kings. How much of the Bible is historically true? What were we talking?
Oh, no, I was just saying how, just as a matter of like a general, very general statement, and I think other people have said this, so I don't want to claim it's original to me, that you go from a period where everything was believed in the Bible to be true to a period of starting in the 18th century to by the end of the 19th.
The Enlightenment?
Where the post-Enlightenment and then modern biblical criticism in the German 19th century, where you go to from everything being true to nothing being true. And then archaeology in the 20th century has kind of shown that big hunks of it are recording historical events and stuff like that. So a big hunk of, let's say, Samuel, parts of Samuel, a lot of Kings are important.
Actually historically correct.
Important historical documents, yeah. And so, it was only in 1993 that there was ever any external external evidence that King David existed. But in 1993, they dug up a little shard that had the house of a mention of the house of David. So it took until 1993 to actually have evidence external to the Bible that David existed. It's just
it's not all myth.
No, it's not all myth. And even the parts that are, there's a reason that book took over 2/3 of the world. It's an it's an amazing piece of work, all through its genres. The various genres. So wonderful comic tales like the Book of Jonah, powerful tales like the Book of Ruth, and then one of the great sagas ever, David versus Saul, and the rise of David.
Jesus. A lot of people Christians don't read the Old Testament a lot, do they? Or Catholics don't. That's what it is?
Yeah, the one Old Testament book that's read by Catholics and if you add up which book is most read, it's the Book of Psalms, but in the Old Testament. But yeah, Protestants, it depends which Protestant dispensation, are very, very Old Testament savvy. So
yeah, but it's how they interpret it.
They're pretty good.
Come on.
I don't know. I've read a lot of articles that come out of little Bible seminaries that are quite smart about just what the text is saying.
Okay. So,
see, I'm more liberal than you are.
No.
On that matter. On illiberal matters.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just feel like shit. Okay.
Do you know that saying that the hard drinkers saying, they say, for a few, all that I'm going to screw this little line up, but it's just something for just feeling lousy for a morning. The rest of the day you just can feel wonderful. So it's like in praise of drinking.
In praise of drinking too much.
Instead of having the whole day be miserable, you just the morning is going to be miserable.
God. Anyway.
I'm sorry about that. You cut that or excise it.
Why?
Well, I basically was incoherent. I couldn't even tell the story.
All right. And will you freak yourself out the whole way?
Well, guys, I'm 72 and the brain don't work anymore. And I wrote a book about that called Losing It, but I wrote it when I was 64 because the Beatles song kind of played into it. And it's just about how you can't rely on what you used to be able to rely on.
Stop doing that.
Oh, I'm hammering on that. I have to gesticulate.
You're annoying people. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we also talked yesterday about Bill absolutely loves a guy long dead, but a former prisoner up at the county jail right?
Yeah.
Who would have? Yeah,
he's just a character, a nut.
His name is Alexander Berkman, and Alexander Berkman was the hapless anarchist who walked into Henry Clay Frick's office over here on Grant Street and tried to assassinate him.
Shot him twice, and at point blank range, and missed. I mean, he basically
well, he didn't
hit him
miss
in the.
because
He didn't kill Frick.
He didn't kill him. Frick was wounded, and you know what's interesting is that was in like 19. Was it like 1901 or
19
was
10 or 11? I don't know. You can look
so Berkman, who traveled from New York City to do this, it was a political action. Take out this guy who's torturing all these steel workers, and so a trial was held here, and he was found guilty of attempted murder and stuck in that jail. What's interesting is that if that happened today, he'd still be, I mean, he didn't spend that much time.
He spent quite a few years there.
Quite a few years? Yeah. Attempted, what would it have been if...
I don't know. You know,
I think they were more liberal in the laws then.
No, if you were going to quiz me on this,
how long he was in.
I would have read up on it. I haven't
okay.
looked into this. But he wrote a memoir about his time in the prison, and it's really a good read. He's nuts. I mean, he is nuts, but he's actually kind of nuts in an interesting way. And you learn about these crazy anarchists in the 1890s and 1910s. And he was the boyfriend. He worshipped Emma Goldman, who was even a better writer and more interesting to read. But I think he called her my little sailor girl. Oh,
the hell does that mean?
Well, I don't know. He must have. I can't believe she just didn't pulverize him. But Berkman what I can't believe is he obviously must have spoken English with a very strong either Yiddish or Russian accent. And the guys in jail, the tough Irish, Polish guys in jail, didn't beat the crap out of him. Didn't beat the crap out of him at all. And what's kind of interesting is how he managed to get through prison. This little weenie Jewish, bespectacled intellectual
who can't
anarchist
shoot at close range, right?
And the thing is he was tougher than nails. They put him in solitary in a pit for months and years, and he just handled it. I mean, that's because he's nuts, but he handled it. So people started to respect him because he was tough. I mean, they tortured him. He never broke.
He ended up being deported, didn't he?
Yeah.
And she too. They were deported to Russia.
Well, Emma was the first one who actually visited Russia and was hoping that, after the revolution,
the workers' paradise.
This would be the workers' paradise. She's the first one who actually wrote back what a horror show it was.
Yeah.
Everybody else on the left is sitting and is believing the lies or is not even believing what their eyes are showing them.
Well, because they don't want to admit that they were gullible or hoodwinked.
Right, but she was honest and was the first one to actually just tell about the horrors, not under Stalin, pre-Stalin, under Lenin.
Yeah. Your secretary has written, Bill, stop it. You are not losing it. You are age progressing naturally. You still know and remember more than I ever could or will, and I'm not yet 72. I don't like to email the show too often, as I am one of those easily humiliated, but I do love listening to Lynn. It has opened up my world.
Oh, that's sweet. Isn't that nice?
Oh, gosh.
No,
now, you didn't tell her to listen to me, did you?
No, she didn't know. I didn't know I was going to be on until late last
night.
No.
I'm saying, how did she found me because she worked for you?
Yeah, I think, she can tell you. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But you didn't say.
No, well, maybe I did. I don't know. So I was in the park walking, letting the dog off the leash, which is against the rules. He was racing around. And some guys there comes up to me and says, aren't you Lynn Cullen's brother? This is in Ann Arbor. Comes up to me and says, aren't you Lynn Cullen's brother? I said, huh? He said, well, I used to live in Pittsburgh for years, and I listened to Lynn all the time. And I said, well, how do you know that I'm her brother? He said, well, you look just like her.
Oh, come on. Come on.
Well, he must have known that I mean, he's in another department in the university, and he must have known that some way, because it was just too amazing. But anyway. So there I am, a mere appendage of Lynn Cullen and my own town. A mere appendage.
All right. Here we go. Here's Berkman.
There's Berkman.
Milton, I love you. Milton's in Columbus, Ohio, and he's always Johnny on the spot.
It's a good read. His autobiography is a really good read, and it's just very interesting. It's a big hunk of American history.
Oh, it's 1892.
Oh, wow.
1892.
Yeah.
Berkman rushed in, drew a .38 caliber revolver, and fired two quick shots right at Frick, point blank.
It still didn't kill him.
The first shot hit Frick in the shoulder, the second in the neck. Well, then he came close. And then he fired a third time when he was being wrestled to the ground, hitting the ceiling. He then reached for a dagger that was in his pocket and struck at Frick's legs. That dagger is, by the way, in the museum here.
Really?
Yeah, it says it's on display. And it says here, despite what the press said, Berkman's attempted assassination of Frick was not random or crazed. He believed he was furthering the cause of the striking homestead workers. And said Kenyon. Okay. These audacious actions against representatives of the political and economic power structure were intended to both raise the revolutionary consciousness of workers and right wrongs perpetrated against working people, which is very much what Berkman was attempting to do when he tried to kill Frick. Yeah. Right, that's what he was trying to do in his...
But I mean, you know what you find out though. There's just so many interesting things. I could never understand why everybody wouldn't want to be an historian, because there's just so much that's interesting, and how we make little kids bored by it. Memorizing dates and the day of this or that, when there are stories and characters and things that are so you could just. Nothing can match it. Constant horror and entertainment. But Berkman's one of the is worth reading this book, because it's just fascinating, and it's about stuff you never would have otherwise known about.
It says here he served for 14 years over there. So, okay. I had the strange experience of when Frick's last daughter died in her 90s. She was in the house on Penn Avenue, and she decreed that the house would be kept she loved her father, as a memorial to her father, and everything in it would be preserved. And because I was a reporter at the time at WTAE TV, somehow I was allowed into the house before it was ever opened to the public, when the archivists were going through every drawer, all this kind of stuff. And it was mind-blowing. Every closet was filled with his clothes still. The bed where he recuperated from Berkman is there. The bathroom next to that bedroom, you opened it up, and prescription drugs to Henry Clay Frick were all in there. Everything was
frozen in time.
It was mind-boggling. I mean, mind-boggling. But I thought, so right here is where they brought him here. And that's where Jesus. It was. Oh, my God, the clothes. Oh, my God, the clothes. It was beyond belief. And I don't know that those things are on display. If you go to the Frick and go on their tour, you don't see the closet. I mean, obviously, they're preserved someplace, but I don't have any idea where. It's fascinating, though. So anyway, Berkman was assuming that the Homestead strikers would embrace his action. They did not. They disavowed it because...
Boy, it would just bring all hell down on them.
Well, they also... Well, who knows? Who knows? But, Milton, thank you for that. Seriously. All right. What else? It's hard to do a show and not do what I usually do.
And not just rail against...
Yeah. The dying of the light. I
know one of the sadder things, if you want sadness, is like the demise of the small town or local newspapers. And I always loved reading the sports section to see how the high school kids, because you always knew some of the kids and see how many buckets they scored or whether they did this or that. And now you just can't find that out. And there's a real
it's
loss.
online. It's online.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And online, you have to deal with the array of just imbecilic comments.
Well, you don't have to look.
You just have to close those comment
it's frightening.
sections down.
It's just
everywhere.
Frightening.
And so you just don't get that wonderful little kind of, and it's not like newspapers didn't lie and didn't muckrake and do all that kind of stuff, but you were never like infinity degrees away from getting a more truthful story. You were just, it was a small town, so you asked one or two people. You always knew somebody who knew one of the actors involved. And so things kept more within kind of rational, verifiable limits. But I just wonder if democracy is actually tied to a certain type of technology.
Look, I mean...
I'm just saying this mindlessly
wondering.
But
yeah,
it's not like fascism didn't take over and in a rich print culture in Germany and Italy, so in the 30s. So it's not like
they did.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, right. But you were saying you have a friend who tortures you by sending you stuff. He knows a lot about the history of 1930s Germany.
Yeah, well, he was just sending me stuff, comments about how Hitler operated and stuff like, and it just maps on. I mean, the opening moves towards taking over, and it just spookily looks like if you substitute it, that it looks like a spooky. I don't ever want to put too much like history repeats itself kind of stuff silly out there, but it just spookily looks like it's describing present events.
Well, here's what I have figured out. We do not learn from history. We do not learn from history. Humans repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. Don't you think?
Well,
when is there learning from history?
Well, there's some times where like people who, like in the military, the kind of people who in war colleges who study battles.
Well,
they actually learn from history.
Okay, but that's different. I'm saying we, the people, don't seem to have any ability to learn. Because we don't know our history.
Well, we don't know it.
We don't know it. And then, I don't know. I mean, the requirement for this experiment in democracy working, according to the Founding Fathers, was an informed citizenry. And we do not have that.
No, I mean, and just one of my kids sent me a copy of a letter Washington wrote to the British commander about the maltreatment of colonial or American officers that were captured by the Brits. And it was just like Shakespeare had written it. I mean, it was just, and you could just tell it was dictated, right? Just powerful prose and saying elegantly exactly what it had to say. And it issued a threat that if you treat our men like this, we will treat your people like this. And of course, it had the effect of stopping it. We now have a person up there, I can't do it, who can't even speak a full sentence in English. So.
No, that's where we are now. But his base loves that.
everyone in his base is much more articulate than he is. They can actually. A big hunk of them are gifted storytellers, and
in his base. What are you talking about?
I mean, people, average American. I mean, the average, especially in the South, there's a great oral culture of people who just know how to lay words on things very nicely, and he's not one of them.
You were saying last night that you think he may well be one of the most evil human beings.
Well, it's more,
I mean, he's in a position to do.
No,
I mean,
it's just that I find it that rather kind of mind-boggling that he doesn't even know how to fake graciousness. So it's like most people who are even just utterly narcissistic still know how to be polite, still know how to be to mimic gratitude, grace, when that would advance their interests. And he doesn't know anything about the diction, lexicon, or any of the rituals of graciousness.
He clearly doesn't.
They're not there. And I just find that rather bizarre. I'm not sure I've ever met anybody like that ever in my life. Most people, the con men types, are very good at faking those kind of. They don't feel it, but they can fake it.
Right.
But
They're
he doesn't.
Charmers.
He doesn't have the means or the knowledge or the ability. There's some hole there that doesn't even allow him to understand let's say, the dictionary of gratitude, the dictionary of grace, in any way. He could even get further ahead if he did, but it's.
Well, I don't know, because it hasn't harmed him. I mean, while on our side, while we look on in horror, did he just say that? Did he just do that? I mean, talking about gracelessness and, I mean, attacking Gold Star parents, attacking John McCain as he's dying, these things that he does. And you think, well, that would finish him off. I mean, even his base would recoil. And it doesn't harm him.
Yeah.
So, really, their hatred of
us
is
in a bizarre way, it's like Stalin said, one killing is a murder. I mean, this is, apocryphal. But killing 10 million, that's just a statistic. So I guess one horror from Trump is a horror, but
if you pile on one
after
another,
it's just
Trump. It doesn't. It's just Trump,
yeah.
And that's why we cannot process. We cannot keep. You would think. Yeah, it doesn't. These outrages, daily, hourly outrages, don't even register
But we
anymore.
said we weren't going to talk about this because it's just depressing.
Okay.
And look, I have voted for Republicans in the past, so I'm one of those, like, let's say, people who wonders where if there could possibly be any more, a basically go it slow, fiscally responsible party. And I just I don't know what those Republicans, where they go now. They what do you do? So I don't know.
Here are these.
But I'm at the end of my. I lived in America when it was great to live in America, and I bequeath to my kids and to their kids yet, who are still, like, I guess, sparkles in the eyes of their parents. The mess.
This horror. H.L. Mencken, 1920, quote, "As democracy is perfected, the office of the president represents more and more closely the inner soul of the people. On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last, and the White House will be occupied by a downright fool and a complete narcissistic moron."
That's when journalism was really great. When you had, like,
Milton, thank you.
You just had what?
Is that not? There it is.
Yeah.
1920.
Well,
so
you don't want to think about Mencken too hard, but
I know.
Ezra Pound said that the purpose of the American presidency is to give no one an inferiority complex. That's Ezra Pound. You don't want to actually.
You don't want to.
But there's a kind of a true.
Okay. Here, Laura, your secretary, has written. This is the story. I was organizing Bill's papers, and while flipping through a newspaper to see why it was in the pile, I noticed a photo of Bill and your name and show, and being naturally curious, or as my mother would say, nosy, I Googled Lynn Cullen and discovered you were his sister and did a webcast. When I mentioned this to Bill and said, I would probably be, Bill, when she mentioned it to you, Bill said that I would probably be offended by the show as you were a Democrat. I listened to the show and
foul-mouthed.
Yes. Okay. I listened to the show and weeks later told him you had not offended me yet. I think there has only been one time I was offended by the topic, but since I can't remember what it was at this moment, it obviously wasn't terribly important. See, she's just totally one of us now.
Yep.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry if I, offended you. I offend people all the time.
Well, the horror of, when we were growing up, you didn't say the curse words except under your breath and maybe among age mates. But even that took some work to finally get there to say now what everybody just punctuates their conversation with fuck and stuff like that. And I just say, like, she was the first one who actually said to my dad, fuck you.
What?
Well, see, you can't even repress it. I thought the lightning would strike and bring down the house, and he didn't hear it. He didn't hear
Thank
it
God.
Because he might have heard it, but what it said is, there's this word that I've never said. He never said that word ever in his life. If there's this word that I think I said, but that's my daughter there, and she would, of course, never say that word. And
so it just didn't process.
It didn't process that. It didn't process.
Well, this would have been in the 60s.
Yeah. I was one of those types who actually has these kind of beliefs that I thought God or Zeus or whoever is up there would have hurled a lightning bolt and just nailed her.
No, he tried to nail Mom yesterday.
Yeah. So, well, God doesn't, she was ultimately responsible. She produced you.
No, I remember Dad once coming home and saying something like when he was driving that some guy pulled up next to him and went like this, he said. I said, Dad, he went like this.
Now, our father actually saw heavy combat in World War II, was in China right after the war, where little 10-year-old boys are offering up their 11-year-old sisters. He witnessed horrors beyond belief, and none of it penetrated him in the least shape. He never said a curse word stronger than damn.
That's true.
And he was oblivious to any kind of, imagine not knowing what this was. He didn't know. And boy, did he get them, because he was the world's worst driver.
Yeah.
Always hogging 2 lanes, drying up traffic. People go around him and flip him the bird all the time, and he didn't know what it meant. How do you be that naive?
Oblivious. Too. Yeah, he was sweet soul. Yeah.
I think he got away with being as out of it as he was because
he was so imposing.
Where he was a big man, and nobody messed with him because he looked like he could take care of business. He was tall and big,
and he had a deep
beautiful
voice.
baritone voice, and he held himself erect and with dignity. And I think people just said, "You don't mess with him." Or because he looked like he could beat the crap out of you. And I don't think he was ever in a fight in his entire life, a fist fight in his entire life, even as a little kid. I don't think he ever was.
Anyway, Bill.
Yeah, are we done?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, when you said our Father, and then I immediately
who
art in heaven, hallowed be his name.
He was a wonderful man.
Wonderful.
We too are blessed with in our parents.
Yeah, we're talking about that last night too. How lucky we are, right? Yeah. So, okay, I guess that's it, Bill. Yeah, it's we did an hour.
How she does this every day, I'll never know, but...
Well, whatever. Thank you. Susan's on tomorrow.
Oh, that's how you do it. That's okay.
Well, that's not how I do it. Right. But whatever. I don't feel well. So, yeah.
I'm doing better. Bye, Laura.
Bye, Laura. Bye, all you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.